This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some major news here at the hands of you and your law firm against the Trump administration. A big victory in court. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, this is a blockbuster victory for anyone who cares about free and fair elections and keeping Donald Trump from trying to take control of those elections in 2026 and 2028. The Trump White House issued an executive order last year, signed by Donald Trump, in which he asserted authority over federal elections. Now, the specifics in this case, and the ruling that we just got, had to do with proof of citizenship. We all know that that's been like one of the big ways that Republicans have been trying to figure out how to suppress voting rights, because it affects married women who change their last name. It affects people who are younger, who may not have their original birth certificate, right? But the implications of this cannot be overstated. This is a blockbuster ruling because what the federal judge said, and I quote, is, put simply, our Constitution does not allow the president to impose unilateral changes to federal election procedures. She also said that the Constitution, quote, assigned no role at all to the president when it came to election rules. So if you are worried, as I am, and I know Brian is, about the president saying he's going to ban mail-in voting, he's going to, he's going to seize voting equipment, he's going to insist that he can count ballots. This is a federal judge saying, under constitutional separation of powers principles, that the president has no role at all in federal elections.
Can you talk about the appeals process and whether you think that it's the Trump administration's ultimate goal to get this thing up in front of the Supreme Court?
Look, Brian, there's no question that the administration didn't pass this rule to have it set aside by a federal district court judge. They're going to run this up through the appellate process. The next stop will be the D.C. Circuit, where that the case will be heard. But I have no doubt that the Supreme Court is their ultimate goal, because they want this to apply. They want this to apply nationwide. They want to establish a precedent that is binding on all courts, not just in Washington, D.C., that the president is virtually a king, that he can decide, who gets to register, who doesn't get to register, what documents they have to provide. And ultimately, remember, and I'm going to put on the screen right here, what Donald Trump posted on social media a few months ago, that he believes the states act as his agents in counting and tabulating ballots. And that's what everything we are seeing right now is all about. That's what this executive order, was only about voter registration, but it's ultimately about establishing the power. What was the seizure in Georgia about? It was about ballots, right? And so we need to take this seriously. And for at least for today, the good guys won, and I'm proud to have been lead counsel in that effort.
All right, well, that's the perfect opportunity right now for folks who are watching. If you'd like to support Mark's work, a small step that we can all take is just subscribing to Democracy Dockets. That's the news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting and elections. So that will give you the opportunity to get all of this news as it breaks from a primary source, the person who's actually filing these lawsuits, and to support his work in the courts where it matters most. And he has 80 court cases being litigated right now, including 24 of them where the only thing standing between your voter data being turned over to the Trump administration or being left to the states is Mark and his team. So again, if you want to show some support for the work that they're doing and the cases that they're winning, the best way to do that is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. I'm going to put those links right here on the screen and also in the post description. Mark, it's worth asking here, is there anything we can read from the tea leaves that might suggest how something like this would perform at the Supreme Court? Like, has the Supreme Court given any indication one way or the other how they feel about this case if and when it's inevitably appealed up to them?
So I think that there are mixed signals here, or tea leaves that go in both directions. So on the one hand, they have unquestionably taken a position that the president has a lot of power, right? They have adopted a very strong presidential power model, one that is not, frankly, supported by the original understanding of the founders, but nevertheless, it's the one that this Supreme Court has adopted, which is the reason why Donald Trump keeps winning cases that you would think he should be losing. On the other hand, if you are a textualist or an originalist, which most conservative justices say they are both, it is hard to get around the fact that the Constitution gives the states, not the president, the power to set the time, place, and manner of elections. And that it explicitly says that Congress can overrule the decisions of the states. So the plain text of the Constitution says states set the time, place, and manner of elections, subject only to override by Congress. Left out of that entire equation is the president.
Yeah.
So I think that the Supreme Court is going to be between these two notions. One, that the president needs to be very powerful and, should be able to do a whole lot of things that the Constitution doesn't seem to say. And on the other hand, they have this textually committed right to the states and to Congress, and also the history and tradition that no prior president has done this. I mean, Brian, I think sometimes we lose sight when we talk about these court cases about just how absolutely extraordinary it is that the president of the United States would even assert this authority, that the president of the United States would have his Department of Justice, for example, try to go get voter files from the states. I mean, this is just like not something that prior presidents thought they had the constitutional authority to do, or that they had the inclination to do, because the only reason why the president would want to be able to decide that he can unilaterally impose additional restrictions on who can register to vote or who can get an absentee ballot or whose ballot counts, the only reason why he would want to do that is because he wants to affect the outcome of the midterms, or maybe not just the midterms, but also in 2028.
Right.
And the thing is, Donald Trump is telling us that that's what he wants to do. He recently said, and maybe we could put this up on the screen, he doesn't think there should be midterm elections. Now, Carolyn Levitt said it was a joke, but does anyone looking at that text see a joke? It's not a joke. This is what Donald Trump wants to do, and the courts dealt him a huge setback in this case. And this is one to watch, and it's one that I'm very proud of.
In terms of the Supreme Court getting their hands on this thing, and I know that you said that they're stuck between, their deference to Trump and this expansive executive authority and the plain text of the Constitution. My concern here is I think what a lot of people's concern is, which is Constitution be damned, text be damned. The Supreme Court's just going to do whatever they want, expressly because they're ideologically aligned with Trump and because there's no higher power than them. And so if they want to just make something up out of whole cloth, they can. There's nobody to tell them no, and they've got the majority. And so can you offer some pushback to that? Because, I know that your position is that the arguments that are made to the courts still matter. And I'm wondering if you share my same concern that a lot of this stuff is preordained to just give Trump whatever he wants anyway.
Yeah. So when it comes to the Supreme Court, I describe myself as a Supreme Court skeptic, but not a fatalist. So it's not that I think like the Supreme Court doesn't have a bias that towards Donald Trump or towards conservatives or towards Republicans, whatever it is. Like, yeah, I think it has that bias, and I think that it is that every time that me or someone in my position, appears before the Supreme Court, as I did in December, or has cases before the Supreme Court, I have a voting case, that it actually just came out. It's going to be heard on March 23rd. It's the Watson case for people following that at home. Big voting case involving mail-in voting. It's not like I think like we're starting with like a totally neutral, balanced set of justices. On the other hand, I'm not a fatalist. I don't think that the arguments don't matter. I don't think that we automatically lose. I mean, the fact is, I can point you to examples where we have won, where my law firm has won, where in cases we've not been involved in, we've gotten good pro-democracy decisions. So I think that it is not a great situation, but it is not a fixed situation. I know that there will be people who disagree with me. There are lots of people who push back on me and say, Mark, it is in the bag, and it is all sort of predetermined. But I ask them to then answer the question of like, why is it then that we can point to these cases where in fact the Supreme Court has ruled against Trump?
Right, and that's the perfect point here, and I think that degree of, I don't even want to say optimism, but pragmatism. I mean, the reality of the situation is going to be important for folks like me who often would describe themselves as Supreme Court fatalists. So I think it's important to have like that, that sense that even in a world where everything does feel like the scales are tipped against us, that the whole thing is not just fixed.
And the other thing is, Brian, I would just say to people who are not persuaded by my argument and see themselves more in the same vein that you are. I make another argument, though, to you not to go down that road, which is that if you go too far down that road, you actually give the Supreme Court a permission structure to act that way. Like, one of the things I felt very strongly about when in the Supreme Court argument that I made is, look, I'm not dumb. I know the Supreme Court took this case because, they probably want to strike down this campaign finance law that's been on the books for 60 years. But by showing up and making the argument, I don't give into the cynicism and the permission structure for them to just say, okay, even the proponents of this law, the supporters of this law, think it's all
right.
Everything is lost. And so, in a weird way, Brian, we give power to Donald Trump that we don't want him to have by saying that he can't lose. Like, we want him to know that he can lose. Yeah. And I worry sometimes that by being fatalistic, we actually encourage, in a way, the Supreme Court or Donald Trump to feel like there's no check on their power.
Yeah, well, look, no one can say with more authority that they are serving as a check on Trump's power than you and your team. Again, this case that you've just won is a testament to exactly that. And I know that this is not the only one. Again, you have 80 cases happening as we speak. So again, a small step that everybody can take to support Mark's work and elevate his voice, which could not be more important than it is right now, is to sign up for Democracy Docket. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy.